Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Journey Intelligence Weekly. My name is Jordan Roberts and I'm here with Mark Pizzoli, and we are both with Journey Alliance, the proud sponsors of this series. We're going to be covering some things on generative AI pilots this week, but before we get into that, if at any point you're interested in how to launch an AI pilot within your team or how to use AI in your role, you can go ahead and scan that QR code there in the corner, which Mark is not. There he is. Or you can go to journey-alliance.com and view our AI page and you can learn more there. So as I said, we're going to be talking about AI pilots and why they fail. So there was an MIT study released pretty recently that said that 95% of enterprise generative AI pilot projects, that's a lot, that's a mouthful, don't produce measurable business value, and only 5% reach meaningful revenue or operational improvement. So this is based on about 150 interviews, surveys of approximately 350 employees, and that showed that only 5% of those pilots delivered measurable ROI. There are many reasons for this, which we're going to cover, but I'm going to kick it to Mark, and why don't you tell us what it is that is leading to this?
Well, I think there's some of the obvious big company stuff, right? Some of this is people being on what some consider the bleeding edge, and sometimes projects when a technology is newer are just a lot more challenging. The technology is not as well known. These are big companies. These are really complex projects. So I think that's on the larger company side. People are saying that they're doing these AI projects. Executives they're saying they're doing them because they have no other choice but to be doing stuff like this for investors. So I think some of them go off a little bit half-cocked, and so that's one of the challenges. But when you start to scale businesses down, if you ask small business owners the same question, I think what you'd find is that in hindsight, if they're honest, they were kind of trying to deploy AI for the sake of deploying AI, right? They really didn't have a clear problem that they were trying to solve, right? They didn't have a thesis for the project, if you will, of AI can improve metric X by Y, and they in all likelihood had something more along the lines of, I can make our customer support better. Okay.
Yeah, it's not a smart goal.
Right. It's not specific, spot on. It's not a smart, right? It's not specific. It's not measurable, right? Is it attainable? Yeah, better is very, so you get the idea. So I think that's one of the challenges for smaller businesses is they embark on projects without clear goals in mind often. I think that's going to be something that's causing failures. As you scale up in business size, though, I think potentially there's a lot of reasons. There's some resistance. It's a new technology. People, if you think about it, the first time a large company, let's say a medium-sized business, 10,000 employees, 1,000 employees, the first time they deploy an AI project of any kind, it's literally probably the entire project team's first time working with AI, right? Like, oh yeah, they may have used ChatGPT, but they're working with all new technologies. I mean, that's a maximum risk project, right? And so And I think it's important to note what most people don't realize is what the study says. It says 95% of the projects failed, but project failure by definition just means that the project didn't deliver the value that it said it was going to deliver. So if you were looking at like, oh, we think this has a 6-month ROI and it took 12 months to get to ROI, technically the project failed, but
Yeah.
you still may have, made progress. So I think there's a lot of potential factors of why this particular survey, which has been torn apart quite a bit since then, came back with numbers like this. But so I would say new technology and lack of like something really succinct that they want to accomplish is probably the primary challenge and stuff.
Yeah, well, you said something too about employee resistance. So there is another article that I read that talked about how employees are actually actively sabotaging AI initiatives. So it's something like 30% of employees admitted to, in this survey anyway, admitted to actively sabotaging their company's AI strategy. 27% are using non-approved generative AI tools. 20% are using tools not permitted. 16% have been aware of an AI 16% have been aware of an AI security leak but haven't reported it. And about 10% of people surveyed admitted to various forms of resistance, including tampering with performance metrics to make AI appear to underperform, intentionally generating low quality outputs, refusing to use generative AI tools or outputs, or declining to participate in AI training. So that actually, one, did not surprise me. And I think we kind of hit on that in previous episodes. It didn't surprise me because we've talked about this concept of telling the story well and managing the story. And if you don't, people are getting their story from the market, which is saying AI is coming for your job. You're going to get laid off, that kind of stuff. And so it's clear that the story isn't being managed well if these people are actively sabotaging. But I do think that that's probably one of the driving factors in that high failure rate that we're seeing.
It's interesting because I guarantee you, anyone listening right now is like, you mean employees would actually actively like sabotage? They don't think of it as sabotage, right? But they would, like, employees would work against you. And here's the parallel I would draw for you. Tell me if this rings true, right? I don't know, probably 15 years ago, maybe 20, I don't know. A lot of U.S. companies were outsourcing roles, right, overseas. And to do that, they had to run these big projects, right? They're moving customer service to India or to the Philippines or to some other country, right? I work for a company that we use development resources out of Colombia, right? So like and these companies are running projects to get that done, right? It's a project to move the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think there was ever any employees that were actively working against that getting done, right?
Like, yeah.
So, and it's essentially the parallels are spot on, right? So if you're not thinking about how your employees are perceiving the change you're talking about, and you're not talking about that to them, and you're not having that discussion, then you're bound to be fighting. I don't know that it's a losing battle, but like you're certainly swimming uphill, right? Or trying to like swim upstream.
Yeah, well, and I think sometimes the answer isn't necessarily a positive one. Like moving the team offshore, like so there were people who got replaced or got laid off. It's being honest about that.
Well, I mean, there were companies that handled it really well. They offered employees like, "Hey, your job's going to go away in 6 months, and if you stay 6 months, we're going to give you this much as a bonus. Like if you stay till the end, we appreciate you really supporting us, and you're going to get a bonus to help you through whatever comes next." So not only are you going to get a bonus, you're going to get unemployment, so you're going to get some support, and that's a company that's like their employees. I mean, they're not going to love it, right?
No,
they're not going to love it, but they understand, right? At a root level, they understand. If companies can't stay competitive in the marketplace, it's bad for the employees too. Like we can talk about how horrible it is to offshore jobs and to use AI to potentially replace people, and we can get into the philosophical discussions about how that's quote unquote evil or not. But the reality is, if you don't do these things and you don't stay competitive, and everybody loses their job, which was really worse, right? So I think that's the fundamental thing sometimes that gets overlooked. How you handle it with your employees is a different challenge, right? And that's a different discussion.
Well, that comment kind of brings us back full circle. Is people are implementing AI because they know that they need it to stay competitive, right? But it's not working because that's really the only thing is they're like
Competitive is not a goal,
yeah,
right? That's not a
it
project.
makes this better. I don't want to be left behind. I need to implement AI, but what does that really look like? What is the real problem we're solving? Otherwise, it's a shiny object, and there are certainly other issues that it probably maybe isn't the best solution for. At least not like out of the box kind of thing. So that's just something to consider when you're thinking, I don't want to be left behind. I want to bring in AI. It's not going to go well if you don't have that reason. But
if that's the feeling you're having, you're watching this right now and you're feeling is, hey, I want to implement AI. I know I need to implement AI to be competitive, right? But I don't, okay, I hear you. I don't have a particular goal or particular metric I'm trying to move forward, and that's potentially a problem. So what should I do instead, right? And my 2 cents, what you should be doing instead is look for things that you've considered automating in the past, but they were too challenging to automate. In the past, you couldn't automate them because you couldn't write the algorithm for all the possible scenarios. So it became too challenging to automate. Well, now you don't have to write the algorithm, right? The replacement for the algorithm is AI. It's a little bit more aware of all the context, of all the nuances of what you're trying to accomplish, and build it in such a way where the 98% of things that it can handle on its own just go through the process, and the other 2 or 3% get kicked out into a manual process. And then based on the things that get kicked out, your process improves. You go and improve the instructions you've given your AI, and then you get from 98 to 98.2. I want to set realistic goals. You're not going to go from 98 to 99.5, right? You're going to go from 98 to like 98.1 to 98.2. But you can continue to that's cutting down on 10% of the errors, right? Mm-hmm. So when you think about it that way, you're making significant progress. That's how you go and decide, okay, I want to stay competitive with AI. You can decide you want to use AI, but you got to go and find a project where AI is the appropriate answer. You can't take AI and be like, I'm going to solve that problem with AI when AI is not the right answer, because that's just a recipe for disaster. Ultimately.
Yeah.
That's like driving without knowing where you're headed.
Very true. So no clear pain point is one of quite a few reasons that it stalls. Something that I think we're kind of talking around here is overbuilding in-house tools. So trying to build AI internally in this study only succeeded about 1/3 as often as purchasing solutions. There's nothing wrong with internal building, but it adds a layer of complication, I think, to bringing AI in. So, Mark, I feel like your area of expertise in.
Well, I think what's important to note here is what they mean by building AI internally. In this particular case, they were talking about like literally building your own AI models, right? As opposed to going and buying off the shelf or using open source models, or going and buying a license or paying for API fees for ChatGPT or Claude or Mistral or whatever, right? Whatever AI you want to use. Building AI, LLMs particularly, is exceptionally expensive. And so and it's quite challenging. And on top of that, all the best talent is chasing the current salaries that Silicon Valley or that OpenAI is and Microsoft and everyone are paying for talent right now. So you're not going to get the best talent. You're not going to you have everything is stacked against you. This is definitely not a time to be trying to build things from scratch on your own. Now, deploying integrations or automations with AI involved in them, where you're using somebody else's models, that's not this, right? So I make sure that we draw the distinction there.
Yeah.
So the failure rates of people trying to build AI from scratch are extraordinarily high. It's also quite high. There's an awful lot of AI tools. I don't know, Jordan and I used to try to keep track of them. They started coming out so fast that I gave up. Like there was like 20 new tools a day. Like I was like, this is
I
ridiculous.
think Mark tried longer than me, for sure. As we were talking about this, I said, okay. After about 10, I was like, that's enough.
I mean, I wasn't like actively tracking them, but you know, I follow some stuff on Product Hunt and places like that follow like early stage SaaS launches, and the number of AI tools that we're launching was peak frenzy. Right, it has slowed a bit, but there are still a lot of tools out there. And you know, and the other challenge that has presented for small businesses is, what if you go buy one of those tools and they go to business, and then now you're using something that doesn't exist anymore and you're relying on it, right? So it puts the market in an interesting spot. So I personally, some of this stuff has gotten easy enough to build and easy enough to customize. My worldview is very much that software development, integrations, all these technical aspects, like that, they've been a bit democratized, and small businesses need to start getting good at developing their own internal solutions. Or you know, again, not AI models. We're not talking about 7-figure solutions. We're talking about building solutions for simple tasks internally that they would have gone before and either purchase a tool or let employees just figure it out. I think they need to start getting better at like automating this stuff in-house, or finding a third party. Journey happens to be one that would be willing to kind of go with you and identify potential places where you can, you know, yield a benefit and yield some ROI and deploying solutions. Because I think that's the future of small business, is really sorting out where you can compete with the big guys, because candidly, AI has given you that power. Like it's given you the power to look as sophisticated and act as sophisticated as a very large company on a much smaller budget.
Yeah, for sure. I know some companies, some smaller businesses kind of think that they don't need that, and they don't think that AI can really solve anything for them. But I think what you just said kind of fights against that a little, is that it's an equalizer. It's something that gives you the opportunity to stand out beside these larger companies. And it lowers barriers to entry as well, for sure. So, Mark, what are some other reasons that we haven't quite hit on yet for these failures?
So we talked about not having a clear-cut goal, right? And we talked about employee resistance. So those are both going to be things you want to really stay aware of. I think the other aspect of this we talked about at length last week, so we won't talk about it a lot this week. It's just managing change within your organization, right? The people part of changing processes. That's not simple and often overlooked. So I think that's an important aspect. And I think the other thing that, you know, like you need effective project management on all of, you know, especially a technology project. You know, hitting your dates so you don't overrun your budget, and so I think companies have an overly simplified view of AI projects. They feel like, oh, it's AI, so we don't even need IT. We don't need an IT department. We don't need an IT guy to deploy this because we understand how the technology works. The reality is, there's a lot of ancillary services that your IT guy often provides you that people don't realize, right? They're often also your project manager. They're also support. They're training people. I mean, they do so many things at a lot of companies that people don't realize how many things are pulled up for that one person or that one department. So I think project management's another aspect of it, is just getting an understanding of, you know, all the moving parts and keeping track of everything and making sure everything gets done is going to be important as well.
Yeah, and in that project management thing, obviously a key part is actually knowing how to measure ROI, how to measure success, and that's another area where there's kind of a missing element, is that these companies are bringing in AI. It's very similar to the not knowing what problem you really want it to solve. They want to bring in AI, but they don't really have a way to tie it to productivity or even P&L impact. So there's not really a way to measure ROI, and who wants to continue investing man hours into something that you can't really measure the success of.
Well, that goes back to how you design kind of your goal for the project to begin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean,
Yeah, so much is going back to that point of you need to know why. And that's probably the most
to
important
your
part.
point, you kind of hit it on the head, right? You need a SMART goal for it. Like it's less about, it's operational, right? It's not project based, like delivering it's project based, but long term it's operational. So it's not as much about it being time bound, like, but it is like, it needs to be specific, it needs to be measurable. It obviously needs to be attainable, right? So, and if it's not relevant to your company's goals, that's the other thing, right? You could be moving a metric that literally doesn't move the bottom line. So what are you moving the metric for? So, so I think that's another thing that I don't view that as a major driver, but I think that there's, people, smaller businesses are not as, their project management principles are generally not as sophisticated as larger companies, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity for mistakes.
Yeah, and something I think that would probably be important to clarify here is when we're talking about bringing in AI to a company, are we talking about just ChatGPT? Are their employees using ChatGPT? Is that what that means? Or is it automations? Is it AI wrappers, which is a term I learned because of Mark? Is it, what does that actually mean for a company to bring in AI?
I think it depends on the project. Like, what do you need to deploy to get the goal, to get the output you're after? Like, I mean, you and I use custom GPTs all the time to accomplish our goals. So I think that's a worthwhile discussion to have. It's like, what are we actually talking about, right? I mean, technically, softwares like Grammarly are AI, right? But like, that's not what people are generally talking about. So like, you just got to get specific about what you're talking about. Are you talking about recommending the next word, or are you talking about decisions that are making, if you've done it well, unimportant or minimal impact decisions, right? Machines that are basically making decisions, but they're low impact decisions. And there's probably a human in the loop before something, gets to an irreversible place. So, but you need to know, is it just an LLM? Because if it's that, I think the biggest impact you're going to make, like the biggest impact you make with your company, is just train your employees on how to effectively use ChatGPT in the workplace, and that'll have huge returns. Like that will pay itself back. And then just let them write a good AI policy, tell them what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what the expectations are, and get them some good quality training. And with that, they'll start to work more effectively. What I think what I see in our cohorts more is some time savings, but often you see improved outputs as opposed to time savings. And so the quality of the output goes up as well. So, so that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, it's very funny. How many different ways can we say you need to know why you're doing something before you start doing it?
What'd you get to? Are you at 5 or 6 yet? I wasn't counting.
I think it's at least 6 at this point. How many different ways can we say it? Very funny that you bring up training, though. We have to insert that if you would like to learn about AI training for your team, you can scan the QR code, or you can visit the website. Other way, there you go, that I am putting in the link or in the comments for you as well. But before we close out, Mark, any other final thoughts on why AI pilots fail, how we can avoid that, or how companies can avoid that?
Yeah, just don't shoot from the hip, right?
Yeah.
Just think about it a bit, plan a bit. Can you get to the data you want to get to? Can you get to it when it's, when it's still fresh, right? And like, so when you need to get to it, and really think it through. Like with every other project, the planning will save you a ton of time later and a ton of pain. So spend some time really understanding what the capabilities are.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone for joining us. Again, if you want to learn about using AI in your role or getting your team trained to use LLMs, you can scan the QR code or you can click the link which I've put in the comments. And we will be back here next week with a guest. This time, Stephanie Reichman is joining us next week, and she will be sharing how she uses AI in her role and how she's used it to shape kind of her own business on the side. So join us again Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern to hear about Stephanie. And thanks again for joining us.
Bye, everyone.